Yes. Here I am. And yes, our next guest is one Charlie Creme. He is ESPN's women's basketball bracketologist. I feel bracketologists, they're coming out like every day now. Charlie's cranking out a new one multiple times a week. Syracuse was a sixth seed in the most recent bracketology to come out to today. They were up as high as a 5 seed last week. We're bringing our guy, Charlie Creme from ESPN. Charlie, good as always to chat. Thanks for hopping on. And want to start with the Cuse here today, Charlie. What do you make of what you're seeing here with Syracuse this year? I don't know about you. I did not expect to see them this high on the seed lines this season.
I certainly did not either. This has been a fantastic year. Coach Jack deserves a lot of credit for, elevating this team, because I don't think anybody, except for maybe within that locker room, thought that this would be the kind of season we'd be talking about right now as we head into February. They were a borderline tournament team in the preseason to me, and now we're talking about a borderline hosting team. That's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I go back to preseason, and I think my thoughts were kind of in line with yours. I thought they'd, be able to take a little step from last year, which was whatever they ended up being, like 8 or some odd teams out of the tournament last year. I forget what it was, but, they weren't really threatening to me. All right, they'll be legit in the bubble mix. We'll see if they can get in. And now you said it. They are at least in the general mix for hosting. They were a 5 after that Notre Dame win. You dropped them to a 6 after losing to Virginia Tech on Sunday. What realistically does Syracuse have to accomplish here over the course of the next month to push themselves in position to potentially host games in the tournament?
Well, the good thing about the ACC, and the ACC is about as fun, or if you're sitting in my chair, perplexing and mind-numbing of a conference in the country. It's just so hard to figure out. But the good thing from a Syracuse perspective is opportunity. There are so many opportunities to win tournament-worthy, resume-building kind of games. So, and they've done a good job of that so far. They've put themselves in this position because of 2 wins over Notre Dame, beating Florida State. So if they can accomplish a couple more of those types of wins, and there's a list of them left on the schedule, then they could put themselves in a position to be even higher than I have them now. Just think about it. A conference championship is still very much in the mix. A few days ago they were tied for first. So the opportunity is there, and now it's just a matter of beating some of these teams that they're grouped in with, and that's the North Carolinas, the Louisvilles, the Notre Dame. Well, they don't have to play Notre Dame anymore, but any of those types of teams that are in that 1 through basically 6 spot. Think about Notre Dame is. Some people have their power rankings and stuff around the country, and they got really excited about that UConn win. But Notre Dame's in 6th place right now in the ACC, right, largely because they lost twice to Syracuse. But that kind of shows you the quality depth that the league has, which means all of these teams in that mix have these opportunities to elevate themselves. Whereas in some other leagues, you're looking at they've got maybe 2 or 3 games left that are really solid resume-building type games. The ACC, pretty much every game you play outside of the bottom 3 or 4 teams is going to do something for your tournament resume.
Yeah. I'm looking at Syracuse's upcoming schedule, and immediately on Thursday they are at Louisville on Thursday. So you're talking about rest of the season. They have Louisville twice. Miami, Duke, and NC State are all teams that you have in the tournament today. So there's more than half of their remaining schedule is against potential future NCAA tournament teams, and some very highly seeded ones. I'm intrigued for you, Charlie. You crunch these numbers. You do it by the book. You know exactly what you're looking at here. For a week like you just had, when you look at Syracuse beating Notre Dame, then Notre Dame beating Connecticut, then Syracuse losing to Virginia Tech, all teams that are kind of in vaguely the same spot. How hard is that to sort out on a day in, day out basis?
It's extremely hard. I'll give you an example of kind of what I go through in this particular week, in this particular bracket. I did my top 16 teams about 4 times. I do it the old-fashioned way. I pull out a piece of paper and I've got an S curve on it, and I just start writing teams down based on everything that all the work I've already done. And I revised that. I even bracketed a bunch of these teams, and then crumpled that piece of paper up and threw it in the garbage. Started again, crumpled that piece of paper up, started again until I came to this bracket. So I bet you the committee members are really happy they only have to do it once, because when you get weekends like this, it becomes excruciating, because I'm trying to do it as accurately and as precisely as I could if in fact the season had ended on Monday night. So I don't want to try to. I'm not cheating it.
Yeah.
But trying to get it right when you've got all of these different scenarios flying. Like, for instance, the Syracuse Notre Dame situation is an interesting one. As I mentioned, a lot of people in their power rankings really elevated Notre Dame after that UConn win. Apparently forgetting completely that 2 days earlier, Syracuse beat them by 14, in Notre Dame. So you can't be prisoner of the moment. You've got to look at the whole resume. But that little sort of part of the S curve where I've got, you've got Baylor, and you've got North Carolina, and you've got Syracuse, and you've got Notre Dame, and that's where the ACC becomes this really complex puzzle right now, because you've got North Carolina and Syracuse both have beaten Notre Dame. So Notre Dame's 0-3 against those teams they're competing with, in my mind, in that little. But Notre Dame has that win over UConn. Notre Dame also has the highest net rating by far of those three teams. But Notre Dame also only has two top. The UConn win was only their second top 50 net win of the season. So there's all these little data points, many of which are conflicting. So you have to kind of figure out, okay, I'm going to put this all in one bucket. I'm going to stir it up. And then I can really analyze it, but it's hard because you think you want to lean on one thing and then something else contradicts it, and that's the whole ACC right now. In the top half is like a Florida State is another team. They've had some really big wins, and then they take a complete left turn and lose a couple games that you're not expecting them to lose. And I'm expecting Florida State to have another little spurt and make us think, okay, they're back, or are they is this just a fluke? So the ACC in particular is really, really hard to parse out and decide which teams really belong where. It's probably a good thing that there's still about 9 or 10 games left where maybe some separation will occur.
Yeah, I say fingers crossed for you. It'll become a little more obvious here down the stretch, as Charlie Creme is the women's basketball bracketologist for ESPN. Always great to talk some women's soups with Charlie. And, Charlie, we spend a lot of time around here with the men's soups for sure. We're looking at net rankings and quad wins and this and that. Does the NCAA look at it for women's soups? Do they follow the same exact metrics for the women right now in their bracketing procedures as the men, or are there any other differences how they look at the numbers here between the two?
I'm actually really glad you asked that question, because it's something that I feel like I almost need to write something to clear something up for people. It's largely the same, except one major difference is the women's committee does not use the quad system. So it's based on quality wins is one of the criteria. When you start having conversations with the committee members, which I'll be able to do when we do our reveal shows, our top 16 reveal shows coming up. One's on February 15th, one's on February 29th, when the committee reveals their top 16 teams, and ESPN will present them to everybody. And I'll be on that broadcast talking about this. But beforehand, we usually get to have a little bit of a conversation with some of the committee members, and then you get an idea of kind of what they're thinking. Even though you don't know what they're going to say yet, you kind of know what they're thinking. And the things they mention are top 25 net wins, top 50 net wins, top 100 wins, strength of schedule. And then you start to get into things that the men's committee also discusses. But it's important to note that there's because the quad system is sort of a sliding scale based on where the game was played and where that team that you played was ranked. It doesn't exist in the women's game, and I see references to quad 1, quad 2 wins in the women's game a lot, and it doesn't exist. If you see the sheet that the NCAA puts out with the things that there's no mention of quads anywhere in it. And I think it's been a confusing point because it's been it's become, even though it's only been a short amount of time, it's been so ingrained in our lexicon with the men's game that we just assume that it's the same for the women, and it's not. Now it's not too terribly different. They still analyze teams kind of in the same way, but there is no quad 1, quad 2 win, quad 4 loss in the women's game at all.
Charlie, I think that what you said is the reason I asked it. I was on NCAA.com the other day just looking up to see where Syracuse was in the net rankings. I'm like, this page looks different than the men's page. I guess the follow-up, is there any good reason for that? Why wouldn't they just do it the same way for both? There's 68 teams in both tournaments. Why are they doing it differently?
I'm not sure. I've asked the question of when are you moving to the quad system? And it's always, we're still evaluating. We're still evaluating it. So there's a lot of things with the NCAA when it comes to that. They don't really give you the why. They'll just tell you the what. And because I'm not really sure they know why. Maybe they're just not ready to. They're just not ready to indoctrinate that. I mean, it took them a little bit longer to add the extra 4 teams on the women's side than it did on the men's. They still do things in the tournament differently. Obviously, the top 16 teams get to host in the women's tournament, which doesn't exist in the men's tournament. So there are differences in how the tournament is played and laid out, for sure. And that those things I think are important as the women's game is building. Not using the quad system for selection process versus just going with top 25 and top 50 and top 100 in the net. There is no. I'm guessing that's why you asked the question. Doesn't seem to be any logical reason why they haven't made that conversion yet, especially since the men have been doing it for, 5 or 6 years now. So to answer your question, I really don't know. I don't know that there's a good reason. They just haven't delved into it far enough to be comfortable doing it, as far as I know.
Yeah, it just feels like, Charlie, and this is not even a basketball thing. It's like an NCAA thing. The different sports have their own their silos. They like to just be different for the sake of it. So, whatever it is. I want to ask you this, Charlie.
Sometimes, yeah.
Go ahead. But it's just like, they're like, no, we're going to keep it a little different just because this is our own little thing. So get out of our way. But, South Carolina's the number 1 team on your seed line. That's I'm sure I bet you pre-fill out your sheets with that at this point. How far ahead is South Carolina of everybody else in the country right now?
Well, a couple of weeks ago, I would have still said, there's a gap, but it's pretty minimal. That UCLA is pretty close. You can't say that anymore. UCLA has lost 2 of its last 3, 3 of its last 5, and everybody else has, except for Kansas State. And Fairfield, actually, everybody else has at least 2 losses. And Kansas State only has the 1 loss, but they haven't. They've been a little fortunate in that their schedule has worked out where they're missing their best player, Ayoka Lee, the 6'6" post player, but their schedule hasn't been all that difficult while they're kind of figuring out how to compete without her. Now, it's going to get more difficult. I have a feeling Kansas State's going to join the 2 and 3 loss clubs pretty soon. But that gives you an idea, just looking at the sheer records of the differences between South Carolina and everybody else. But that gap has definitely widened. UCLA's had its I thought forever, even going back to the preseason, UCLA was the second-best team in the country, and they're just not playing like that right now. Iowa obviously is very good, but just recently lost to Ohio State. NC State's been very good, but had a loss to Miami that widens the gap with a team like South Carolina, who within that same time frame goes to LSU and takes care of business against what was a top 10 team. So the gap is I think pretty sizable right now. There's still some things you wonder about South Carolina because of their youth when it comes to playing in the big stage of the NCAA tournament. Last year they were super experienced and still had that one bad game in the wrong time in the Final Four. I mean, obviously they have to be considered the prohibitive favorite to win the championship this year, but I think because of their youth and because it's such a different team who hasn't gone through some of the things that last year South Carolina team had already gone through with tournament play, you wonder if that might catch up to them, or just the idea of the burden of being undefeated is going to catch up to a younger team too.
Yeah, will be interesting to watch. But that win over LSU last week was impressive, and they just keep cruising along with that 0 in the loss column right now. All right, Charlie, always great to chat. I'm sure we'll catch up again when we get closer to tournament time. But thanks so much for some time today.
Oh, Brian, anytime. Love talking to you guys.
All right, that is Charlie Creme. He is ESPN's women's college bracketologist. The Orange women at Louisville on Thursday, currently sitting on the 6th line as far as NCAA tournament seeding. With that, we will step aside for a few. Come back a little 411 with our guy Tim. That's next. It's QSportsTalk.com and ESPN.